even though Nintendo games are usually known to be a bit easier so people of all ages can enjoy them. From time to time, there are difficult moments added to these games that will take you several tries to complete. This includes bosses, where in today's video, I'm going to show you the absolutely hardest ones in every single Nintendo franchise. Here I'll try to include every established series of games the company has made, and I'll even include a few from the sports and party franchises if there are any. Oh yeah, and before I get started, my name is Copycat, and if you haven't yet, then please subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to stay notified when I upload new videos. Starting this video off, we're gonna look at the hardest boss battles from Nintendo's first franchise, Mario, who made his home console debut on the NES in 1985. I did have some difficulty narrowing down a single one from the over 20 games, so in the end, I chose to showcase 3. One of these is the almost game-long Fury Bowser fight in Bowser's Fury, as I have to include as the entire game really just revolves around battling this gigantic evil foe. Although at times certain moments can be easy, there still are a few difficult sections that you uncover once you find more catshines. The second is the Bouldergeist boss battle from Super Mario Galaxy. More specifically, the fight that occurs when the Daredevil Comet is present in the galaxy. This causes you to only have one wedge of health, meaning that if you take damage during this fight at all, then you'll lose a life and you'll have to restart. This boss is already semi-difficult without this added challenge, so it will definitely take you several tries till you defeat it. The third and final boss fight I want to mention is the Bowser in the Sky one from Super Mario 64 for the N64. This is because it's incredibly hard to properly spin throw Bowser during this final fight, and I remember constantly getting frustrated when I would try to fling him into a bomb. This is not crazy difficult, but is definitely tedious. I decided to separate Mario RPGs from the mainline series, as they really are two completely separate franchises with boss battles that are uncomparable. In terms of the hardest throughout this collection of titles, there's one that almost every list has at number 1, and one that is a sleeper for the hardest in any Mario game. Most people say that the fight against the Shadow Queen in Paper Mario, the Thousand Year Door, is the most difficult, as without the help of Vivian's Veil move, you'll almost definitely lose. This is tremendously important, as Vivian takes Mario off screen, so that you can avoid attacks for an entire round, so when she unleashes her charge move, you'll take no damage. Once you figure this out, then you'll have a pretty simple way of winning against this insane boss. However, I'd argue that the fight against Culex in Super Mario RPG is even harder, as this Final Fantasy boss has several different ways that he can hurt you, and one overpowered way he can critically damage you. The only way to securely beat this boss is by using the Lazy Shell item, as when it's worn, it greatly increases your physical and magical defense, while also guarding from elemental and status-based attacks. This greatly increases your chances of surviving longer against this boss, and in turn gives you a better chance of defeating him. The next franchise we're going to look at is Metroid, where I'm going to showcase the hardest bosses from both the 2D and 3D games in the series. On the 2D side, the fight against Phantoon in the SNES Super Metroid game is the one that I would pick as the hardest, only because you don't have much health or any upgraded weapons when you face this boss. Phantoon is also incredibly hard to kill, as it's constantly teleporting across the screen and phasing in and out of existence, so you have to be very precise in attacking it, while also being careful in dodging the balls of fire it spawns. Now in the 3D Metroid realm, I see more people saying than others that the Metroid Prime 2 Echo's Spider Guardian boss was one of the most frustrating in the franchise. This Morph Ball centered fight has an extremely difficult map to traverse around, and actually damaging the boss with your bombs is frustratingly hard. What's even more annoying about this strange fight is its proximity from a save station, meaning you'll have to go through a lot to get back there when you die, which will inevitably happen at least a few times. The next franchise up in this video is The Legend of Zelda, where I've seen several different choices for the hardest boss, but the one that most consistently appears on almost everyone's list is the Breath of the Wild's DLC, Monk Maz Koshia Battle. Although he's not as menacing as many other enemies in the franchise, he is insanely crafty, possessing the ability to clone himself while effortlessly floating around the battle stage. On top of this, he can pull off some pretty insane combos, zipping around extremely fast where your only real option is to dodge, then counterattack, which is hard to predict. There are many different phases during this battle where the final gigantic one can really only be affected by some of your special abilities. This will put him on the ground and leave him completely vulnerable to attacks. I do have to mention basically every boss from The Legend of Zelda 2, Link's Adventure, that was released for the NES in 1988. This title is considerably different than most others in the series, as it features 2D platforming gameplay, which can be hard to control at times, and even unforgiving against certain bosses like the Helmet Head or Thunderbird. Even though technically Donkey Kong got his start way back in 1981 in the famous arcade game with the same name, it wasn't until 1994 where he became the protagonist in Donkey Kong Country. If you include Donkey Kong 64 for the N64, without a doubt the hardest in the entire franchise is that game's final boss, King Krusha K. Rool. This fight was almost impossible, as you have to defeat him with each of the 5 characters you control, but you only have 3 minutes, and most of your attacks are removed. If you fail to knock him out with all 5 characters, then he will fully refill his health, or if he kills anyone in your party, or if the 12 rounds pass, then the battle resets, which makes things even more challenging. Now I do have to shout out the hardest 2D Donkey Kong boss, which in my opinion is undoubtedly the fight against King K. Rool in Donkey Kong Country 2. Here he fires a barrage of objects at you, where you have to throw cannonballs back at him so they lodge in his gun, damaging him. After this first section of cannonballs, he begins to fire smoke clouds at you that causes your controls to invert if you're hit by it. This just adds another layer of craziness to it all, and you're bound to die several times trying to defeat him. Admittedly, I haven't played many of the Fire Emblem titles, but from what I've heard from a few friends that are diehard fans, the hardest battle in the franchise is the one against Medeus, the Shadow Dragon, in Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light. This final boss is an extremely heavy hitter while also shrugging off any attack you throw at him. No matter who you put in this dragon's way, he will most likely kill several of your party members, and one of your favorites will surely die. There are several strategies that you can employ against him once you learn the in and outs of this game, but for average players, he's a straight up nightmare. Even though Kirby games are generally easier as they are directed towards a younger audience, there is still one relatively hard boss battle against the Mark Soul in Kirby Superstar Ultra that came out for the DS in 2008. This is the final boss of the game where Mark's body absorbs Nova's energy, growing even stronger. This fight is completely unpredictable, with the Marx's soul following no set pattern of attacks, as well as being able to deal heavy amounts of damage if you're not careful. On top of that, when you reach him, there's no guarantee that you'll be at full health, and you'll just have fought another boss, so the abilities that you have attached may not help you in defeating him. I guess this boss isn't as hard as others that you'll see in this video, but it is still going to give you some problems. The next franchise we're going to look at is Wario's, where there's one tough battle that instantly comes to mind in Wario Land Shake It's final boss, the Shake King. This enemy throws several different attacks your way, including a dash, ground pounds, intense lightning bolts, laser beams, and balls of energy where at times he combines them for some really tough sections. However, because Wario Land is primarily a puzzle platformer, once you figure out how to properly defeat this boss, it'll be way easier the second time around. I just have a memory of first approaching this foe and losing several different times not knowing what to do. Another Nintendo franchise that's usually considered on the easier side is Yoshi's, but it does have one final boss that always gives me difficulty in Super Mario World 2's Yoshi's Island's Giant Baby Bowser. This kaiju-sized enemy starts off way in the background, quickly stomping towards you, while also spitting fast-moving fireballs in your direction. To defeat him, you need to collect the giant eggs that are ballooned in, throwing them at the giant boss to deal damage. This gets harder as the fight progresses, as he starts to move much faster and spits out fireballs at a much higher rate, so you'll need to be quick and precise with your throws. The Star Fox franchise is the next we're going to look at in this video, where pretty much every boss battle from the original SNES title is considerably more difficult than any else in the series. This is because the game itself is rather rudimentary in comparison to later titles, with some areas where your depth perception is completely off, you get very low frames per second making the controls feel less responsive, and the fact that you have no aiming reticle makes it extremely hard to hit enemies. The most frustrating boss by far in this game is the Great Commander, which has 6 weak points that you need to hit that unfortunately have really broken hitboxes. If you don't have bombs or the plasma twin blasters, then you'll have an extremely tough time in finally defeating this boss. Picking the hardest boss in the Pokemon series is quite difficult, as your experience against them is all dependent on your progress and the Pokemon you select through your playthrough. Many people online state that the battle that gave them the most trouble was Red, from Pokemon Gold and Silver, who was the absolute final boss in that series of games. Even though Red's Pikachu is the highest level on the team, it's actually one of the easier ones to take out, where Espeon, Snorlax, Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise are the ones that give you the most difficulty, especially if you don't have the right type matchups to face off against them. If you're unprepared and underleveled for this fight, it will be almost impossible to beat him, meaning you'll have to go through the tedious chore of trying to level up. I decided to add the Luigi's Mansion franchise to this video, as there was one boss in the 3rd installment that made me die several dozen times in Clem, who can be encountered in the basement levels of the hotel. What makes this battle so different is that it mainly takes place within a pool of water, where you need to strategically maneuver Luigi around without getting struck by any of the objects thrown at you, or running into the spikes on the water's edge. I found this very hard, as controlling your character in the duck inflatable is incredibly annoying, and I lost a lot of health just trying to properly learn how to traverse around the stage. I wasn't sure if I was going to add the category of Nintendo sports franchises to this video. That is, until I remembered the fight against Mike Tyson in 1987's NES Punch Out game. Growing up, I have a memory of my cousins discussing just how impossible it was to defeat this absolutely intimidating foe, where you need to almost perfect your button inputs to be victorious. This boss is also very unpredictable, where he will throw out some lightning-fast jabs and incredibly devastating uppercuts, which if not avoided will easily KO you. I know many people who have played this game and have never even gotten close to defeating Mike. The final franchise we're going to look at in this video is the Nintendo Character Ensemble Fighting Super Smash Bros. Series, where the hardest boss is hands down the Master Core, which is the secret final boss for the series Wii U and 3DS installments. Of course, this battle is much harder depending on the difficulty level you're playing at, where setting things to 7.5 or above causes the Master Giant form to spawn after you weaken both the Master Hand and Crazy Hand. This form has many insane attacks that are hard to avoid, but with some skill, it's not impossible. The next forms of this boss are still relatively difficult to face, but dying can be avoided if you're good enough to mitigate the amount of damage you take. After going through all the different forms in under 5 minutes of allotted time, you'll finally complete the battle and receive the game's secret credit screen. Alright, that's going to be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this one. If you did, please leave a like, comment below what you thought about it, and of course, subscribe to my channel. Also, I do have an Instagram at Copycat Gamer, so please go give that a follow. There I upload some cool clips and items from my collection that you won't see anywhere else. Hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!